Today's episode is sponsored by the Full-Time Travel Academy, your one-stop destination for learning how to get started and how to afford full-time travel. Learn more at www.fulltimetravelacademy.com. I speak a lot of languages, 6 to be precise, which is great for Europe in my case, not so great for Asia. I still remember going to France for the first time when I was 16 years old, at which point I spoke highly mediocre French. And I was terrified of making a mistake because I was really afraid of being laughed at. I lived with a French host family, huge host family, I think I've mentioned them before. And after about a week with them, I went out to a bar one evening with 2 of my host sisters, and I had my very first screwdriver, otherwise known as a vodka orange. Now, this was my first cocktail in my life, and I was tipsy pretty fast, but I wasn't crazy drunk. But the effect of the tipsiness on me was that I stopped worrying how people would react to my mistakes in French. And then I started joking around with the language and intentionally using the wrong word for, I actually referred to myself, I pretended I was pregnant, and I used the word, there's in French, if you're a human, you're enceinte. And I lived with a farm family with cows, and when the cows were pregnant, you'd say they were pleines. So I referred to myself as pleine, which probably, if you don't speak French, doesn't sound funny at all. But in French, it is. And my siblings started laughing with me instead of at me. And from that moment, I learned the connecting power of humor and the strength of daring to communicate even if you don't do it perfectly. But before you can get to that space, it's so normal to have fears about imperfect communication. And maybe you even have a bigger fear. What if you need help and you can't communicate? What if you need medical help and you don't speak the local language? And from there, a flurry of other fears can build up. So let me share a few stories with you, first-hand experiences, that I hope will help illustrate what happens when you go to a country where you don't speak the language. So in 2019, I went to both Vietnam and Thailand for the first time. I don't speak either language. Now, no matter what country I go to, if it does have a language that I don't speak, I do make the effort to learn the basics. Things like, how do I say hello, thank you, do you speak English, and where's the bathroom in the local language. But I don't have enough words to hold a conversation, but I can at least sort of start the communicating. Now, when I was in Vietnam, at one point, I spent some time in the lovely area of Ninh Binh. I highly recommend it. And I used a bike to get around. The roads were really narrow, and one day I needed to turn onto a main road, really narrow, and there was this huge truck that took up almost the whole road, like both, it's a two-way road, and this truck pretty much overlaps. And so there's like a narrow pathway on one side of the truck, and both directions, like that's how you go. So I stopped and I watched tons of motorbikes pass by the truck with no effort. I was like, there's no way they're going to fit, and they're just zip, zip, zip. So I made my way around, and I decided if they can do it, I must be able to do it. And I found myself with the truck on my right side, and on my left, there was a 10 or 20 foot drop off into a river. So as I cycled between these two things, I got really nervous. And because I was so nervous, I lost control of the bike and I fell. Now, luckily, I fell into the tubes, I fell into the truck, but not even the actual truck. Like underneath it are these, I don't know what they are. They're like soft tubes or pipes, and I basically grasped them as I fell, which at least softened the blow, but I did end up, a bit scraped and bruised. And even more lucky, the truck driver saw me and raced over to make sure I was okay. And at that point, I did not need language to understand that this man was trying to help me. He was making sure that I was okay. And later that day, I found a medical clinic, and for $2.50, a lovely nurse cleaned my wounds. And I seem to recall that she spoke maybe some broken English, but somehow everything worked out. So it was, all in all, a great experience. And, maybe that experience of falling off the bike wasn't great, but the knowledge that, hey, I can get hurt and people help me, and I don't completely need to speak their language to get it. When I was in Thailand, I took a 4-hour bus trip south to a town called Prachuap Khiri Khan. When I went, it was not well known. I think it's better known now, but the entire time I was there, I think I saw fewer than 10 Western looking faces. And we pulled up in this bus into this town, and the bus station was more like if you've ever taken a public bus and there's sort of a little signpost with a flag on it, that was the bus stop. There was, it was in front of a convenience store that was closed. It was nighttime, so it was dark, it was raining, and I had no idea where I was going to stay. And I had assumed I'd arrive at a bus station, that there would be some sort of, tourist desk or something, and I'd find somewhere. And there wasn't. So as I'm getting off the bus, there's one other passenger at this point, and she looks at me and she points outside, and then she points to her umbrella and she hands it to me. And I made a thank you motion, and I said, I kind of said no, and I showed her I had an umbrella. And then she pointed at me, and she put her hands together and put them next to her cheek and leaned her cheek over in a sleeping motion. And I understood she was asking me, did I need a place to sleep? And I nodded my head, yes. And she pointed to where I should go just a few blocks away to find a place to sleep. So again, another lovely story. And I didn't even ask. She just knew, and she was helpful and directed me to what I needed in that moment. Now, South Korea was a little more daunting. When I went there in, I think it was 2023, I spent my first week in Seoul, but about 45 minutes subway ride outside of Seoul, and it was a much less touristy area. So there was not a lot of English spoken outside of the hotel I was in. My first day, I angered the cashier at a 7-Eleven because I needed to get money onto my subway card, but the problem was I had no idea how much money I needed. And, I handed her the card, and I know she asked me, how much do you want? And I just looked at her blankly, and I tried to say very slowly in English, how much do I need? And then she just got really angry. And I know that even though I couldn't understand exactly her words, I'm sure that she was saying something like, you should speak better Korean. And I understood her frustration because, look, I was in her country and I should have learned more Korean. Unfortunately, I didn't in that moment. So I reached into my wallet and I just found some cash and handed it to her. And that's what got added to the card, and it worked from there. Now, later on that trip, I went to Jeju Island, another place I highly recommend. And one day I was walking along a sort of a waterfall by the water, I think it was by a major body of water. And there were some older women cutting up the strangest catch of critters from the sea I had ever seen. I at that point, I didn't realize they were probably the women divers. and they had gone in and dived in and gotten these critters, and they were cutting them up and serving them on platters to this line of people gathered. And I stood there and I listened because I really wanted to try whatever the heck this was. I wanted to know what it was and how did I get a plate of it. But, everyone there was sort of in groups of 4 or more, and I was by myself, and I didn't want a big plate, and I just was hoping that somehow I'd hear the language enough times that I'd figure out how to order it, but I just didn't get there. So while I was standing there, I took some photos, and eventually these older ladies started yelling at me, and I did not need the language to know they were saying something like, "Lady, if you're not buying anything, get lost." So I did. And the next day, I went to a cafe and met this lovely Korean student who spoke excellent English. And I told him the story. And he told me that I should not feel badly, that these ladies were really rude. And also that apparently this even happens to Koreans. So getting yelled at sometimes by the older Koreans. So so I felt like I had an experience and it was normalized and, lived to tell the tale. Now, last year, I went traveling around Turkey in August for a month. It was bloody hot. And when I was in Izmir, there was a wildfire. And apparently, I guess the smoke, me breathing in the smoky air, triggered my asthma, and then I got bronchitis. And I was in another town when the coughing got really bad, and my hotel directed me to a nearby hospital to get some help. Now, when I got there, the receptionist did not speak very good English, but somehow we got me into the hospital, admitted in. I didn't even know to ask for one, but as soon as I was in, I was given a translator who spoke, who could translate the Turkish into English for me. And he spent about 3 hours with me, helping me go from, the x-ray department to the whatever department I had to go to, meet with the doctor and understand what the doctor was saying about what I had. And he even went to the pharmacy with me to get my prescriptions and explain to me how I was supposed to use them. 2 weeks later, I felt really faint. And so I realized I needed to go to the hospital, and I, by myself, jumped in a taxi and in Istanbul went to the nearest private hospital I could find. And once there, they spoke English really well at reception. And I was immediately given a doctor who spoke fluent English, who admitted me overnight for excessive dehydration. And look, obviously it is a bit lonely, but the nurses were great. I remember these people came and they wanted to make sure that the bedding I had on the chair, whatever, it's not really a bed, but they just wanted to make sure that I was really comfortable, and anyone who came in to help me or give me food, there was always someone who spoke English in attendance. So, what I've learned is whether you use body language to act out whatever it is you're trying to communicate, or you can use a paper and pen and draw it, or nowadays Google Translate. It seems to me that now more than ever, traveling to places with foreign language is more approachable than ever. And if you're staying somewhere for a while, piece of advice, make friends with young kids. If you meet, a family, see if you can hang out with the kids who are usually in school learning the local language themselves, and they are sticklers for pronunciation and proper pronunciation, and have no fear correcting you 20 times if it takes that. And they really make some of the greatest language teachers I've ever had. So my take is, if you have a dream to visit a place, don't let language be the reason that you don't go. I hope you found the episode inspirational. And hey, have you ever traveled someplace where you didn't speak the language? And do you have a great story about it? Share it in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Talk to you on the next episode.